Hey guys, welcome back. A few things before we get started as usual. Don't forget our conference is coming up right around the corner, 3 months away. I think 90 days actually from today, May 2nd through the 5th, Grafton, Illinois. It's going to be a lot of fun. Secret Space Conference. It's a topic that's getting there's a lot of mockery being made of the secret space program right now. And there is some legitimacy to what's actually happening. Yes, there is some shills and some frauds, but we want to kind of build a credible case, to actually do it justice. So if you're at all interested, come out and join us May 2nd through the 5th, Grafton, Illinois. Tickets are in the link below, secretspaceconference.info. And there are live stream tickets available also for those who can't make it. That's going to be a lot of fun and super excited about that. Don't forget our promo codes. They're all in the description below if you're looking for some new CBD or Omnia
balancer.
Omnia radiation balancer for any type of radiation or 5G. And obviously we have our Teespring merch, 20% off that with promo code 20 and back. All of that is in the description below. Tonight, we are joined by our friends Justin DesChamps and Ryan DeLarme from Vigilant News. Well, Vigilant News is their new program, but Justin's been with Stillness in the Storm for years now. And Ryan, you're founder of Underground Newswire, right?
Yeah, I've been doing that since about 2018.
Yeah. So I guess they've decided to combine forces and they're doing like a nightly news show covering just worldwide events and among many other things. So we're super excited to just have some fun chatting with them tonight and getting into some current things, which we don't typically do. So welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's awesome. How long have you guys been doing this for anyway?
We're right at the 3-year mark, I believe.
Wow.
That sounds
exactly 3 years now.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's amazing actually that we're still doing this, but it's a passion at this point, and it's like you can't throw in the towel now. You got to keep going,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
To the end. It's fulfilling too, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh, super. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's awesome. Sure.
But before we get started tonight, I want to share my screen because I woke up to this on social media. There was a sighting of essentially a portal, what looks like a portal, right over my house. Basically, it was.
It's at Jefferson County, right?
Jefferson County, which is minutes away.
I mean,
but it was seen. Can you guys
10 minutes?
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, it's like 10 minutes away, but it was seen all the way in Arkansas. And I went on this Facebook page and started reading the comments, and there was tons more pictures. People like this was a mass sighting. And what's interesting, this comment that I have on the screen says, it was above our house too in Jefferson County, Missouri last night. My dad saw it and took a picture of it. A retired Air Force colonel. He said it was the most unusual thing he'd ever seen and had no noise. Not that we need an Air Force colonel to tell us that this is unusual, but
it's unusual. Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you guys seen anything like this before? I know the Norway spiral was looked similar to this.
Similar, but a little different.
Yeah,
I think it was bigger. A little bit bigger, maybe.
I think it was bigger, but don't quote me on that. I haven't seen one in with my own eyes, I should say, but I have, kind of done a tour of these things when I was trying to figure it out.
Well, the Norway spiral,
here's the Norway spiral.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, it's like a long thing.
Okay, I forgot about the long tail too.
Right. Yeah, and this is an actual photograph, apparently, of that. And then there's another one here.
I was gonna say I thought I remember one that looked closer to that. Maybe it wasn't the Norway spiral.
This is what you were thinking of, Aaron?
No, there was but then there was one that looked more similar to, or maybe that is what I was thinking of.
Shrimp.
But right. See how the spiral goes on for a long time.
So that was a lot of people's speculation that it was a portal. But then Dan Cooper, who you guys know we've had on the show, he hopped in the comments on Facebook and he said, yes, the Norway spiral and this one are similar, not the same, 2 different portals with different purposes. However, I can tell you for certainty that is a portal and that it is most definitely not created by an EM drive.
Fascinating.
The reason I thought it was created by an EM drive is because Penny Bradley, if you guys are aware of her, she talked about this in one of her interviews about the failed SpaceX launch is actually a test flight for this technology that it's an EM drive that creates a portal. And she explains it. I know this is a little out of the norm for us, but I'm going to play this video if you guys don't mind, where she breaks that down, and then we can just discuss it from there.
Yeah.
What they're calling the EM drive. We called it the copper microwave, where you make a bell out of copper and you hit it with microwaves and it produces force. If you're in an atmosphere and you need to open a portal, that's the way to do it, because when you open that, it forms this teardrop-shaped field, and inside of that, you can open a portal and it won't suck the atmosphere through it. It's safe to go into hyperspace inside that. If there's no substances, it closes right behind us. It's the field that's produced by the EM drive. It makes a shielding. Elon Musk had this launch that was supposed to be a big failure. He was supposed to be putting this satellite into space. And I saw this teardrop field form and I went, oh my God. And then I saw the spiral in it. And that's an EM ship. There was one in Florida, one in California, and there was one in Russia, and there was one in China. Earth level military has that level of technology now. The big three have just tested it. And I could just imagine all the generals doing a happy dance, because that's incredible technology. The cover story was that they were putting a satellite in orbit and that it had basically failed at the second stage. It wasn't even that, it was testing this engine. All 4 times that I saw it tested, it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It looks like a rocket coming up. And
so she just goes on to describe it more in detail, but you guys saw it. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
Well, first of all, I don't discount the possibility, and this is actually a good opportunity to get into like discernment techniques.
Right.
So, I study a lot of epistemology, which is basically the philosophy of discernment. It's been around for a very long time. It might be one of the oldest forms of philosophy, although it has many different names. And it's essentially the philosophy is how do you organize information and how do you figure out whether something's true or not? So a really good thing to keep in mind when we talk about this stuff is there is no perfect discernment process. Any time you're using a discernment process, you're not going to get a black and white yes or no answer. You're going to get a range of possible answers based off of what kind of system you use to evaluate it. So let's consider the possibility that this is actually a portal or an EM craft. What evidence do we have to support that? Well, we have the evidence that we see here of this footage, and it looks like they're spiraling. Now we have somebody who provided testimony that in their professional opinion or their expert opinion, it appears to be a portal, and they're drawing from their own experience with this. Now, the question for us is, how do we interpret that? Because we might not have, what was the one we were just linked to? What was it?
Penny Bradley.
Penny Bradley. We don't have Penny Bradley's experience. If we could see through her eyes, if we could telepathically connect with her, then we could use all her experiences, her research, all of her knowledge to be like, oh, now I see why she thinks this is a portal. But we just have to take her word for it, right?
Exactly.
Because we don't necessarily have that experience. And now maybe you're somebody who went to school for physics, maybe you understand fluid dynamics and this, and you can have a different opinion. But essentially the idea is that your ability to fact check it or discern it is based on what supporting information you have behind it.
Right.
And it's about considering possibilities. So I'd say that's definitively a possibility that this is some kind of a portal, or it could be something more mundane. For example, in when they do flight missile tests, especially ones that go on the upper atmosphere, there's a point where the booster rocket falls away. And if it's eclipsed the gravitational horizon, then it'll start to create all these really beautiful geometric effects because that booster rocket flies off and now it's drifting through space. And if you've ever seen anything drifting through space, it's basically going to form like an almost perfect circular eclipse as it drifts away and it starts to fall away. And this exhaust is still coming to come off it. So there is a case to be made for the fact that it might just be a missile. And what we're seeing are these high atmospheric effects.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that's true. So we have two possibilities. Which one do we work with? And as a last little point on this, you have to be okay with possibility. I don't know for sure that this is a portal, but I don't know for sure it isn't a portal. And so I evaluate each one and I prepare for each one. So that way, whatever comes out in the future, I'm prepared for each one.
Right. And
yeah,
the reason I shared Dan Cooper's post, because he is a physicist and he works with free energy technology, stuff that he can't even patent because they'll just bury it. So and he deals with this stuff, in particular the EM drives and stuff. We've had him on the show, talked about that. And it was his expert opinion that it was in fact a portal. That's why I shared that. But we don't know. Like, I love what you said. Everything coming in right now, we literally just have to take everyone's word for it. That's even with, in the mainstream media, that's how they operate. They know that. They know we just have to take their word for stuff that's happening around the world because we can't prove it. We're not over there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at least we know we can't trust them.
Right.
What the mainstream media does, what I've noticed, they create the perception that the information is coming from experts. So they're always using the term experts say,
Studies show.
They psychologically create the illusion that the information they're putting forth or they're giving you is expert opinion. And so you create the authority of the information, and then people just go, oh, that's the truth, without questioning. And that just stops you in your tracks of being like, is this true? Let me look into it myself. Mm-hmm. We're already conditioned not to do that anyway. So that's what the mainstream media, they do really, really well, is like create this psychological illusion of this is expert information. You have no need to question it. Just accept it. Right. And that's the worst thing you can do in general with anything is just accept it immediately. 100%. That's it. End of story. I have the truth, right. And that's the most dangerous thing you can ever do, in my opinion, in life.
Intelligence agencies definitely know how to manipulate societies, and we know that they're embedded in the media. So
that's right.
Yeah. So there you go.
And they're embedded in the alternative, so it's like, even when you start to break, like you go through that process where you can't believe the mainstream news anymore. And then all of a sudden you're open to all kinds of stuff. And so then they take advantage of that as well and throw in a bunch of false stuff. That's what's so hard about the stuff that we look into and we're brave enough to talk about and consider. Mm-hmm. But it's just, it's been so saturated with like plants and,
That's right.
So how did you guys find each other? How did you guys find each other and start Vigilant News? And what do you guys, just for our audience, I realize we didn't give you a proper introduction. So just want to explain to our audience what you guys cover and what you guys actually do.
Cool. Well, I guess I'll start first and then you can jump in with how you got going. I started Stillness back in 2013. It was just a radio show for a while. Then we created the website, not me and Ryan, but me and my partner at the time, Julian. And we were just sharing our research, basically trying to figure out what the world was like. And we just put our information online because we wanted to join the conversation. And that took on a life of its own. And flash forward years later, I was covering all sorts of different things, health, ufology, spirituality, philosophy, all sorts of stuff. And then in 2018, I think? Is that when you reached out to me? I had a little form to submit to reach out to me to help working with me. And then Ryan reached out to me. Yeah,
I was living in Chicago, working 3 jobs, trying to get Underground Newswire off the ground. And I was heavily using, Stillness for my, to get my news. And I was among all the places that you tend to, aggregate news from. But so I was like, man, I might as well reach out to him. He's already doing what I'm trying to do better. So I was like, I reached out to him, started an internship in 2019 in January, I believe.
Okay. Yep.
I think Sterling and Teresa had just left.
It's right around the time we started the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think I met you, Aaron, in 2018 at DOD, I think, right?
Actually, I think it was 17 or 18? Because I know I was at Eclipse of Disclosure, which you were at in 2017.
Oh, you were there too. Okay, maybe you were there. And
we either met there or we met the next year and at Dimensions of Disclosure in 2018.
And then I met Aaron, I think 2019 DOD.
Yeah, and I met you in DOD 2019. Yep.
Yeah,
nice.
It's funny.
Awesome. Yeah, so I mean, we've been working together for years, off and on, at different levels of closeness, and it's hard to find people that have the same interests and have the same process for dealing with fringe information, right? Some people, they just want to like believe anything that comes across their Twitter feed. Other people are so skeptical they can't even get in the game. And when me and Ryan started working together, I'm like, wow, we can actually play with these ideas in a way that doesn't create like dogma or irrational rejection. And so, we've been working on stuff for years together. And then I don't even remember how it happened. Maybe you remember. But
I came to visit you guys in Georgia last year. And I mean, I'm sure you guys have experienced this with some of your friends, but like once you start to go through an awakening, there's like puts a little strain, like a stress test on a lot of relationships. And,
yeah. Yep. Tyler and I both went through that.
Everybody, I think all of us did.
I think all of us did.
Every one of our listeners.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can all. I think it's just a universal thing that we all have to go through. But for me personally, it affected my relationship a bit, and my relationship with a lot of my friends. Love them all forever, but I've started to feel alone in a group of friends, and like luckily, I got to go visit Justin and everybody down here in Georgia last year, and we all hit it off so well, that we were like, hey man, why don't you come down here and we can do more stuff. And about half a year later, it finally happened. So
yeah, and then we were here, and I think it was like 2 weeks after you got here, we're like, hey, we should start covering the news together.
Yeah.
And we did one of my mega streams for Stillness, and I want to say it was like 2 or 3, maybe into that, or 2 or 3 weeks after that, we started Vigilant, right?
Yeah, well, it was 11/11, right after Durham released his last indictment. And when he was like, you got to jump on with me, because I'm the guy that's always in there, like reading every headline every morning. And I mean, he does that a lot too, but his plate's pretty full by comparison. So it's like, I'm just like reading the headlines, reading the articles all the time. So it's like a perfect combo. Like I can talk about the headlines and he can elaborate on them. And it's
great.
And people can find you you have a YouTube channel, you're on Rumble primarily.
Right. Yeah. Stillness in the Storm is if you just go to stillnessinthestorm.com, go to our social, there's going to find all the social media we're actually still on anyway. And we've got Rumble. That's where we post all the Vigilant news, but we also post across to Gab, Brighteon, and BitChute right now. And then if we can, we'll put it on YouTube.
Rumble is the big one. Though.
Yeah. Rumble's the big one for
I'd say Rumble's our main hub. But we're working on a landing page and, website, but. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's awesome, man. You guys are doing great work, and you're covering, you're covering everything that's happening right now, which is not easy to do, because we're just getting fed lie after lie. Did you see George Soros come out today, and he dubbed Xi Jinping the most dangerous man in the world?
Saw that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. He literally, it's a video. He comes out, you can barely understand what he's saying because he's just like, he's so old. And but he's warning. He said that he's talking about the CCP and how they're trying to take control, and how he's the most dangerous man in the world. No, and then this is right. This is what we have the Beijing Olympics coming up.
Dangerous to the cabal is what that means.
Right. Exactly.
Right. I mean, these guys are so good at deflating your concerns by speaking to them. It's called pacing in hypnosis. How do you want to trick somebody good? Well, you screw up their life, and then you put sympathetically, even if you're the orchestrator, so that they feel relief and they continue to buy into wherever you're guiding them. And that kind of sounds like what Soros is doing.
And also, the nations of the world, like we're pretty aware of a schism happening in a lot of government agencies and stuff like that, where it's like patriots, nationalists, whatever, versus like embedded deep state globalists.
Yeah.
And maybe there's also infighting among those cabal members, you know what I mean? So it could be something like that.
Precisely. Yeah.
There's probably right. That's a great point. The infighting amongst the cabal. I mean, you never know we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah. Nothing is black and white. We don't know who wants out, who's had a change of heart, who's been blackmailed, who's doing things because they want to do it, who's doing it against their own will, whose family, you never know what is going on. We can't just take everything at face value.
The only thing I know for sure is there's a ton going on behind the scenes that is not apparent. And most of what we get on the surface level, especially in the mainstream, is fake or the exact opposite of the truth. Many times.
That's kind of why we wanted to create a show that's like not afraid to talk about these speculative things without like, putting our whole faith in them, but because it's like we just have no idea, but something's going on. It's very apparent.
There's a lot going on. Yeah.
Right. Well, what do you guys?
That's one of the big things about Vigilant is we want to cover the news, but it's not just cover the facts on what it says. I offer our personal perspective, always making sure we say, hey, this is our opinion, not, part of the story, but also put a positive spin on it, because in my estimation, every piece of information and every event, everything that happens in reality is actually for a spiritual purpose. And when you start to think and think about that and ask those questions, you can often find that continual thread of spiritual truth weaving through everything. And that can be very inspiring and help you deal with all the craziness in a lot of ways. So,
yeah,
exactly. Nailed it. Yeah.
Let's elaborate on that a little bit, because I find that intriguing, because there is a lesson in all this stuff. It's a spiritual journey. It's a spiritual war. It all comes down to that. So you're saying that every mainstream current event is part of that spiritual journey?
Exactly. I mean, but more than that, literally every piece of information. So every experience everywhere, omniscopically, is all part of a spiritual purpose and experience. There's nothing outside of that. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, you flip on the TV and you see some stupid things shared on The View and you're like, oh, that's not spiritual,
Yeah.
No, that is actually playing a spiritual role. And that's what I would argue is kind of at the base of our reality. Is the creator so perfectly set up the universe back in eternity that literally nothing can happen that doesn't fall in alignment with what the creator wants. Now, does that mean that there's no free will and everything's predetermined and we can really not change fate? Not at all. But it just means that the game is so perfect. So it's kind of like being in a maze where, yes, you can go down one place and it might take you longer to get to the end, but eventually you're going to get to the end as long as you keep trying.
Right. Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's important to remember for those who think that they're on the wrong path, because there's always something there for them to get them back on the right path. And it's always in your darkest moment when you find,
if you think about it, and this is getting into a philosophical thing, there's no such thing as a bad experience. There's no such thing as a wrong experience.
Right.
Because think about it. Anything that seemingly bad or painful or negative that happens, what does that do? Well, it causes you to grow. It causes you to expand in consciousness and grow and take your power back. And that's a big thing on a collective scale right now, is humanity is being shown exactly like a mirror where you've given your power away. You've given your power away to all these authorities and governments and institutions that clearly now it's obvious they don't have your best interests at heart. And now we're all taking our power back. The Canadian convoy, like truckers, look at that. It's like, if that's not an example of us taking our power back and stepping into our sovereignty, I don't know what is on a massive, massive scale.
Well,
and that's just worldwide. It's already expanding worldwide. Exactly.
We're all truckers now, boys.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no such thing as a bad. I mean, there is on one level, but ultimately everything is for our own good and our own growth ultimately. And if we can get to the place where we understand that and we really work with that, then you're working with the universe and not against it. You're not in resistance mode all the time. And your life will just expand and
right.
Amazing.
Exactly. Well said.
Do that,
Well said.
That was my little
No, but speaking of this convoy, the truckers, this is, strength in numbers. This is what we want to see right now. And I don't know if you guys, how closely you guys have been paying attention to that. I've been just loosely following it, but I did think it was interesting how Trudeau, like all of a sudden gets COVID and has to go into hiding.
Well, he didn't even get it. He didn't even, he tested negative for it, but he said, just to be safe, I'm going to quarantine.
Yeah. He's getting out of Dodge. He knows he can't, like, what did they say? They won't be able to walk down the street. What did Q say? They won't be able to walk down.
Yeah. I mean, he might have got in trouble with his superiors too, who decided to give him a checkup from the neck up, as they say. So,
right. Yeah. And then they also said the revolution won't be televised. Well, how much of this is being covered positively on the news. It's not, which
it won't be televised. It'll just be streamed on Rumble.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be streamed on alternative media platforms.
It's convenient timing that happened when there's 50,000 plus truckers like taking over a whole city. We were watching Salty Cracker's live stream. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but like they were just shooting off fireworks, honking, and then they were looking at Reddit posts of people like, I can't believe this is an act of terrorism, left liberals in their houses. And it's like, if it was New Year's Eve, they would have been fine with it. But because it was truckers protesting, trying to like fight for their freedom, not just their own freedom, but
how is that a bad thing? Exactly. I'm very curious about that. How do you come to that conclusion?
It's the mental gymnastics, man.
It's unbelievable.
Right. And then you got Joe Rogan, who's kind of, it's very interesting what's happening with him. Have you guys been following all that? I'm sure.
Oh
yeah, definitely.
What are your thoughts on him? Because he's becoming like he's becoming one of the most famous. I don't know if that's the right word, but
he's multiple times bigger than any mainstream news outlet.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah,
exactly.
You remember the statistics?
Yeah, it's the highest rated news show is Tucker Carlson, and Joe Rogan has more than 3 times the viewership.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
exactly. That's
and Spotify's
podcast. Think about that.
Right. Yeah, I remember I watched the Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson. I think it was one of the early ones too, back in like 2017, 2018. And they were talking about Rogan's success. And I think it was around that time when he had like already been pretty big for about a year or so, but it was still like growing, and he's bigger now than he was then. And they were saying something like, I think it was 10 billion or 20 billion downloads a year of his podcast.
Downloads.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's a massive amount. That's not including YouTube views either.
That's insane.
Well, and what's good about him?
That's nuts.
What's good about him is that he got what we would call the sleepers, normies, all years ago, people following him for other reasons. He was a comedian, Fear Factor, all this stuff. He talks about
to the mainstream.
He appeals to the mainstream, and then they follow him, and they're going on this journey with him, and so he's gained some credibility in his viewers' eyes. And now that he is bringing this new information forward that contradicts the narrative, it's massive. It's massive because it's doing more than we could ever do, just trying to start a YouTube channel and like tell all of our friends and family you're being lied to. It doesn't, it's not really how it works. But the fact that he's already embedded in that in society, and now he's being a voice of reason, and not everybody's going to agree with everything. And sure, he might not see the big picture as much as we do. Maybe he does, but he can't talk about it. It's still huge for the collective, I think.
Yeah, we need to see more of it. I don't know if you caught our show last night, but we remember the CNN talking heads, like, like classic, shaming of Joe Rogan's, viewership, about how they're lesser than, and how the CNN people are more enlightened. We want to save them from this like negative behavior.
Yeah, literally, that's what they said. Though one of the pundits or the commentators was like, well, we've been curating this information, and it's not really good for people to see these things, and we have a more enlightened perspective. So they're basically saying that they know the truth and you don't, and you're an idiot if you listen to Joe Rogan.
You're stupid if you listen to Joe Rogan.
And it's dangerous, if you listen to Joe Rogan.
That's a favorite go-to of the media.
Same with
this information.
Same with Project Veritas. They're doing the same to people who listen and are follow Project Veritas, and they're discovering they're unfolding an entirely right, but he's exposing an entirely different narrative on COVID.
Literally the power of the power of him is that it's literally people's own words he's capturing, camera. Like it's them saying it, and it's like it's reality being shown to you in your face. And I love how they try to spin that as he's spreading danger. It's like it's literally these people's own words. They're exposing themselves.
Imagine the adrenaline rush of that job.
It's like,
oh man,
how do you? Oh my god!
Right. Well, he seems to be doing just fine. Yeah.
He's on top of the world. Yeah. Right. He was born for this. You can see it. Like he has no qualms about doing it. Looking at his body language and everything. And I think, if I remember correctly, here's a little factoid if your audience might not be aware of, although you probably are. There were, during a trial involving Facebook's fact checkers, they were forced to admit that their fact checkers aren't actually checking facts. They're just checking it against their opinion. So
yeah, let's talk about the fact checkers. I know you guys, that's one thing you guys cover. What have you revealed about them? Because we know,
the Poynter Institute, they started a thing called the International Fact Checking Network. And that's when the fact checkers that we know today first started popping up. You can go to the Poynter Institute's website and see their major funders. And it's like a who's who of institutions you should not trust. So you got Facebook, the Koch brothers, all these foundations that have been caught, money racket kind of stuff. So yeah, those are the people who are the arbiters of truth today. It's very interesting.
That's right. Yeah, we did I think it was a 20-minute or maybe 30-minute investigative journalism piece about the Facebook fact checkers. You can find it on our Rumble. And Ryan actually worked heavily on that. So yeah, it was really good. So
right.
A lot of that.
I have a friend who's a fact checker, and she said they have meetings where they're given, I guess they're given headlines, news talking points, and they have to sign off on, they have to all collectively agree. So she's like, oh, look at this, what they're trying to get me to sign off on as the narrative. Like they're in a room before they start fact checking, and they're given a list of things that are facts and what's not. And I guess they collectively agree somehow. They don't really get to agree, but they have to sign off like, yeah, I agree that this isn't true or this is true. And sometimes, she knows that it's totally bullshit, but what she has to sign off on. But some people just see it as a job, and so they just scroll. They're just, scrolling through the internet for this certain headline, and they have their argument ready, and then they just debunk it on the spot. It's all preordained. It's not really fact checking.
And when you look at who owns these fact checkers, it's the people, what they're fact checking is all the stuff exposing the people who own the fact checkers. So it's not hard to put, two and two together here when you just look into this stuff. And I think Nikki Willis exposed that in Plandemic. He's like, a good example of that is Bill Gates owns many of these fact checkers that things that are exposing Bill Gates and Microsoft and then deep state connections there will get fact checked by the fact checkers owned by Bill Gates.
Yeah,
that's right.
Or Pfizer.
Right. It's
like what it is it's literally just further propaganda to psychologically manipulate people into thinking something's false because they want you to think
that's right.
That's
basically
really all it is.
Basically, the fact checkers get their own 4 a.m. talking points, that's how it works.
It's just like the media.
It's the mainstream media and the powers they knew from the start that the internet and especially social media was a big threat to the narrative because freely spreading of information is not something that works for them, and for the narrative. So they're like, all right, censorship and fact checkers go,
That's right.
That's literally all it is.
Right. But then, Ryan, was it you that posted something about how censorship is like throttling people into invisibility, like the algorithms. So it's not even so much the censorship, but the algorithms right now can almost make you invisible on the internet. And we're experiencing that a lot. It's unfortunate, but if our name is tied or if it's linked or shared from our page, we might as well just stay home. It's not going and it's not getting anywhere. And these algorithms are killing us and many other people. And it's becoming an actual problem,
Yeah, I created a new Facebook sometime around like Halloween, I want to say, when I first moved here. And for the first 3 months of being here, my reach was just incredible. And then about a week or two ago, I got flagged for something regarding a story that Gateway Pundit ran that ended up getting retracted. But then they used that opportunity to jump on me for all these other things that we had mentioned, like posting our shows and stuff like that, where we mentioned COVID. And then all of a sudden there's a thing on maybe this is happening to you guys too, where it's like, only you can see this, but your account is restricted. And, the engagement and the views per post will go from several hundred down to like 6 or 7 people.
Right.
Seeing it. It's like,
Right.
what?
Right.
Yeah,
It's like your dad and your sister, like people that like not trying to reach.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, on Facebook.
Yeah.
Like, so we had our Facebook deleted once already. We had like over 5,000 likes and gone. But back then, yeah, we would share something and it would be seen by hundreds of people. It would get a ton of reactions. Now we share something and it gets seen by like 10, 15 people, I think.
Maybe
if that, and then 2, 3 reactions at most. And that's it.
Right.
And it's like heavily shot. We're heavily. And then Twitter, we got deleted. We can't get back on. We got deleted off Instagram. We were able to get back on there. But Instagram, when you try to tag us on there, it won't let you, I think. Right?
Yeah, it's all a joke. And
it says like this page is not allowed. Yeah. To be tagged.
Stillness can't even be shared in messages on Facebook.
Yeah, totally banned. You cannot share anything Stillness related on Facebook.
Really?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So let's shift this up a little bit. I know you guys talk about the False Memory Foundation or syndrome, and you guys, that's like a little side project you're working on. And it's extremely important for people to be aware of, for those who aren't aware of it. So would you guys mind kind of explain what that is to people and what your goal is with trying to uncover that?
Sure. Ryan, why don't you start it off?
Well, we're in a unique position to shed some light on this. It's kind of like a scoop that we have exclusive access to. The False Memory Syndrome Foundation was started sometime in the 80s as a way to protect parents who were presumably being accused of things that they never did by their children, such as like child sexual abuse, mostly, pretty much specifically that. That certain influential and wealthy people found that could be useful to them and funded them, and they became a huge thing. I think their main like go-to person, Elizabeth Loftus, was called to the stand in Ted Bundy, Bill Cosby, Michael Jackson, Robert Durst, most recently Ghislaine Maxwell's trial she showed up at, basically saying that these 9 accusers all suffered from false memories and that nothing ever happened and Ghislaine Maxwell is innocent. Right. Which I think we can all say is pretty absurd. So it just so happens that a writer for Stillness, also just a very accomplished psychologist, psychotherapist, and her husband happened to be the biggest critics in the medical field, even at the CDC, against this False Memory Syndrome Foundation. And they've had many court battles. They represent. So should we just go into the story, you think?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so
yeah, please do.
They're a couple, the Whitfields, and they had practice, and they were administering psychotherapy to a gal who had repressed memories of child abuse. She remembered that her father had abused her, and their whole approach is that you can't just be prescribed medications for things. You got to confront these things. And to this woman, it meant that she wanted to confront her father about the things she remembered. When she did that, instead of like giving their daughter the opportunity to heal and face it, or like maybe even have a conversation like about it, they instead attacked her credibility, got her fired from her job at a university, and just tried to sue her pants off, basically.
Tried to ruin her life, basically.
Yeah.
And those parents are the ones who founded the False Memory Syndrome Foundation because of this.
That's right.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So what are you guys digging up on that now?
Well, honestly, it's a massive story. This story is so, it touches so many different things in many different ways that, we could easily devote the rest of our lives to this thing. But
really,
right now we're currently going through all the specifics of the material. My end of it is I'm more thinking about the mechanics of the psychology. Like, is it even possible to have false memories? If it isn't, then what's going on? Things like this. And what we've been able to determine, and this has partially been admitted by Elizabeth Loftus, who headed the foundation for many years, that they haven't been able to successfully plant a memory of the severity of child abuse ever. The most they've been able to indoor laboratory conditions is get somebody to remember like little details differently, like a stop sign instead of a yield sign, things like this. So there's essentially, when it comes to the science of it and trying to prove if this is even a real thing, you have to work from a certain perspective. What they've done is they've taken children's experiences, and because they recover memories, and this idea that you can't recover memory is a widely popular thing, especially after the Satanic Panic. They just want to blanket label anything related to recovered memory as highly suspicious and put it in the false memory category. But they have not been able to do it. So just think about this for a second. The argument that they're making is that a child can get abused, a child can go through an experience and then in their own mind, through some process that they're not exactly sure how it works, create a false memory of abuse. And that false memory of abuse will have all of the symptomology associated with an actual abuse experience. And yet they haven't been able to actually create that in a laboratory setting, which means that they're arguing that a therapist who's just going about their regular therapy can accidentally manufacture false memories. And this has been a major problem. So, it's a bogus premise to even think about. It's tantamount to saying that you can go into your garage, throw a hand grenade in your garage and completely materialize a car all by accident and do that repeatedly across time, but they can't reproduce that in a laboratory setting. So it's
clearly just a BS cover explanation.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. But enough wealthy people saw value in it that they got a lot of funding and they were used like throughout the years for a lot of kind of cabal related issues. Most recently, Ghislaine Maxwell, and she's also going to show up in Prince Andrew's trial in September. So perfect time for all this to be coming out.
Exactly.
It's like they were getting ahead of the game. It's like the deep fake technology. They put those videos out way early. So then,
stories about it. Yeah.
It gives them a free pass to use that technology or blame things on that technology.
So when the videos start coming out, they go, "Look, we told you about this. This is
right." Oh no, that's not Hillary. That's deep fake technology.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
They're trying to get ahead of the game. But what we're seeing right now is they're just shooting themselves in the foot every step of the way.
None of it's going to work.
Yeah, it really hasn't worked. It didn't work for Ghislaine Maxwell.
That's right.
Somehow these 9 accusers all got false memories implanted into them. It's BS. Like, what are the chances?
That makes sense.
Right. Yeah, but I mean,
exactly.
They're these people are so evil, I guess you could say, and they're so used to getting away with everything they've been doing for eternity. They're not. They don't know how to operate when there's counter moves.
It's almost like that's all they know.
Yeah.
That's all they know. That's the only way they know how to live and operate.
It's almost like they're really smart because they set up this system to manipulate us and deceive us all, and it's almost brilliant. And it's well thought out and it's very strategic. But at the same time, it's like they don't have the motor skills to figure out. They don't have the logical thinking to like act on the spot. Like they think quick because they don't know what to do when they're having.
They don't have creativity.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't This is what we have.
Yeah, they have to
that's why they have to make all these plans, and they just stick with the plans and the script. But once they're forced to get off script, that's why you see like they don't know what to do.
Yeah, and then everything they're doing is it's stupid. They're not used to pushback. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you do that?
They're not used to it at all.
You're totally exposing themselves. Well, they're so used to just operating in secrecy that
with very little to no pushback, like you said, for so long, that's all they've known. And now they're having all this opposition for the first time ever. And like you said, they're scrambling because they've never had to deal with that. They don't know what to do.
Yeah, just imagine I'd love to be a fly on the wall in like a back room somewhere where the cabal is just like
it reminds me of that video from what's the movie Downfall, the German movie about Hitler and how Hitler is like the last days of Hitler, and it's a clip you've probably seen all over the place because people take it and it's Hitler like in this room in his bunker with all these generals and they're all like freaking out like, oh, Hitler's pissed off, and he's like, and they overdub it or they replace the subtitles with something else like, wait, you put Pelosi up against Trump? What were you thinking? And he's people like freaking out. It's hilarious. Yeah.
Oh,
good
that's
stuff.
amazing. I want
So
to
you
see
think
that.
Hillary's gonna run again?
Maybe.
They're
I hope so, because she'll never
Yeah,
win.
exactly.
No
'Cause
amount of like cheating is ever going to
definitely
get Hillary
wins.
Clinton in
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think they're definitely positioning for Hillary to get in there, but it is.
I hope they're delusional enough to try that, because that will be a disaster for them.
Right.
Yeah.
But as horrific as the idea of Hillary being in the White House is, it's, if they tried to do it, it will expose the fraud in a massive way. And it's exactly what happened in 2020. Because in 2020, a lot of people who weren't necessarily hip to any of this had their eyes opened and had that dark night of the soul moment. And now they're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So that's good news.
Exactly. You nailed it.
Right.
Like Norm Macdonald said, the only person people hated more than Donald Trump was Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Now she'll never win, I don't think.
No, it's not. It's curious. I'm curious to see what's going to happen. Obviously, the more and more we're getting into this, these surface level politics are like, or they are the illusion. Like, that's not what's happening for real at all, in my opinion. There's something way bigger going on behind the scenes that I think we're getting glimpses of it, but we're never really going to know the full picture.
It's a part of it. But it's the surface level part of it. So
right.
But you go, the more the real
but
stuff.
What I'm trying to say is, like, really cool. It's almost like it's all staged. It's like they're fabricated issues that they have on a whiteboard somewhere, and they're just waiting. They have a date that each one, like, oh, we're going to go to this state for an audit. Then next month we're going to be here for the audit, and then we're going to have a Trump. It's like all this stuff. It's like it's like you just lose interest in it, and like, come on already. Like, this is the biggest. We know it's fake. It's like, why are you continuing with the show? It's frustrating.
Well, here's the thing, that in the election fraud, it's already been exposed. And if that was a sting operation, it's like, okay, well, you've already got everything you need clearly from this past election. So in my mind, it's like, if there is going to be another election, they're not going to do that again. There wouldn't make any sense to just do that again, like have a deep state person win and all the fraud gets exposed again. It's obvious, because that's what would have to happen for them.
Well, I think at this point, it's like,
so it's like
they're trying to get the people to do stuff instead of like someone's going to swoop in and save the day. It's like time for just us to save the day. And that's kind of what it seems like is happening. Like, that's why I started to get back into what's happening on the surface level politics, just because it seems like that's where a lot of the catalysts is, like the highest catalyst is, because that's where a lot of people who are unaware are at. So you got to meet them there and then kind of like be like, okay, like lead them through all that stuff. And then it becomes so obvious that it's just a show. It's like professional wrestling. And then they like when you're a kid, when you thought wrestling was real, and then you're like, oh my God, it's fake.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's a great point. That's a great point about meeting people there, because we don't think about that sometimes, but that you're right. That is where we're going to find these people. And from there, they're going to, I mean, obviously it's all being exposed anyway, but they're going to start seeing it. It's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And as you were mentioning, like how everything is kind of set up, like they pick dates for stuff and it's all kind of like planned. Look at like how this Russia saber rattling is happening now that, the 18 to 2 year marker for most pandemics is running out. It's just like
right on time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right on time.
Think that's a coincidence? No.
Right. So what are you guys seeing? What are you guys seeing with what's going on over there?
With Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah.
It seems like the cabal is trying to goad Russia into a war because, the war economy, optics, you need to take the focus off of Biden and Fauci and all of the stuff that's, just a train wreck here. It doesn't make sense that Russia would want to start a world war. They have the same GDP as the state of Florida. They can't afford to go into a world war. And we know that the cabal hates Putin for whatever reason. It seems like he kicked them out a while ago. Whether or not he's good, part of the KGB, it's all like, who knows? I don't know. But I do know that they don't like him. I mean, that's pretty evident from like the last forever, all the anti-Russia propaganda that they've been throwing around at people
Very
like
obvious.
us.
Yeah, exactly.
It's curious to me. Go ahead. I
was going to say, in Ukraine, their guy, the main cabal puppet there, Poroshenko, was just indicted. So it's like they're doing the saber rattling, but it doesn't seem like, in my heart of hearts, I don't feel like a world war is about to break out.
Right.
Right. Well, I mean, in a way, it's actually already happening. It's just like covertly being fought right now.
Yeah,
right,
true.
right.
Exactly.
And it's
not
just,
like World War II, World War One, but like a silent, almost like World War, something like that.
It doesn't, with the infrastructure they have set up, it doesn't make sense for either side to start bombing each other. It doesn't make any sense at all. And we're so far past that. And the technology, the advanced weaponry we have, you wouldn't need an atomic bomb or missiles or anything like that. They have direct energy weapons, and I mean, literally everything you can think of, and things you can't even think of. They don't need
Tesla's, well, he called it a peace ray, but it got dubbed the death ray.
Right.
He said, like, literally, if every nation in the world had this, there would be world peace, because no one would dare attack anyone else, because you could just annihilate their entire army instantly, basically. But here's the thing: we know they have Tesla's tech when they took all of his stuff when he died, and so we know they have all this crazy tech that like they can do all this stuff. So it's like, what's really going on behind the scenes?
Why bomb somebody when you can just jab them and mind control them?
Exactly. I think the real
war is psychological more than anything else.
The real weapon of mass destruction is the World Economic Forum and the Fortune 500, because you don't even need weapons, because you just control everybody.
Exactly. But what's the best way to control everyone? Psychologically, get them to.
That's it.
People only obey laws and rules and mandates when they think it's a good thing, and they think they have to. Well, it happens when people wake up and they realize, oh wait, we have the power, and this is taking away our freedom. And like the truckers right now and all this stuff, it's like people are waking up realizing we have the power. Fuck you if you tell us we have to do something that's against our own good, clearly.
Right.
It's clearly for an agenda, and like that's when you just stop complying. That's all. That's literally that simple. But to do that, you have to understand. You have to wake up. And that's the great awakening that's happening. It's like people are waking up, realizing, like, wait a second.
You can feel the shift.
You can feel it totally, and it's amazing. It's
right.
really, really exciting.
And I know, Justin, I know that's one of the things you like to talk about is the psychology of all that stuff, of the media and the narrative and all that stuff, and how that actually plays into our everyday lives. And I just like to hear you break it down from your perspective on how that operation actually works, because it's something that we need to expose the most right now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first point is that the end game isn't not necessarily what people think. A lot of times we hear like depopulation or, invasion or total control, and that's sort of it. But what we touched on already is a huge, huge point. And we don't have to go too far off of Earth to get the answer to this, which is that the more authoritarian and totalitarian a society is, the more it cripples creativity and innovation. And the cabal realized at some point in time in history, it seems like it was around the 15th or 16th century, that they needed to shift away from a totalitarian authoritarian, like an overt slavery model or control system, where you literally had people like being whipped and they didn't own anything, and they lived really awful lives on feudal lordships and things like this, to a false freedom model, basically, where people actually believed that they were free. And as soon as they believed that they were free and they had some degree of control over their own lives, then they could be more creative. And that was really, really important for them, because one of the price that you pay for being a dictator and a totalitarian person, a psychopath, or a narcissist, if we want to think about it in more of like a boots on the ground human level, is you cost yourself your creativity. The more totalitarian you are, you cost your creativity. So what they actually have to do is they have to create a parasitic relationship with the herd, with the people, where they siphon away their creativity or their, biophotonic energy, loose energy, vampires, things like this. So what they have to do is they have to create a false slavery system. And in order to do that, you got to create a false reality. So part of that involves, and we've seen this developed really since at the beginning of the 20th centuries, when this really seemed to launch in a major scale. But before then, they were working on it too. It's the destruction of education and philosophy. So interestingly enough, if you don't have the ability to think critically then you can't decode information properly to actually get truth. So what they need to do is create a situation where the population is dependent on authorities, what I call conceptual authorities or conceptual totalitarianism. So in other words, why do you believe what you believe? Most people don't have a personal answer why. They believe what they believe because somebody that they thought was in a position of authority told them what to believe. And that's the mainstream media. And once somebody believes what an authority tells them to believe, then their social psychology in the midbrain kicks in. So we are herd animals. So, because we're social or herd animals, you always want to go along with the herd because your own body, your brain is going to make you feel safe, secure, and able to actually live a free life when you're a part of a herd. As soon as you start to step out of that herd, your anxiety levels go up. You get all sorts of neurotic things happening, and it makes it very difficult for you to live a happy life. So they steal people's ability to think for themselves away from them. And then they put them in a situation where if you want to fit in with the crowd, you have to believe the mainstream narrative. And now it becomes a battle of truth. If you want to actually awaken your own mind, seek the truth, you're going to be stepping outside of the comfort of the herd. And as everybody knows who's listening to this right now, that can be really intense for people. And a lot of people just fundamentally what, I just can't do that. I can't think for myself because God forbid somebody tells me that the mask I've been wearing for 2 years might not be as protective as I think. My whole reality falls apart. Yeah. So exactly. These guys are masters at manipulating psychology at a level that is, to be honest, we should be respectful of their accomplishments because I've learned so much about psychology just studying the system than I ever would have learned if I went to school for psychology. So
it's very right.
Totally Machiavellian. Yeah.
Well, it's like It goes back to they know us better than we know ourselves. And it's funny how you say when you leave that herd, you start to panic almost like you don't know what to do because we're not taught how to be sovereign and live on our own. It's like the cell phones with it's like the cell phones with a proximity sensor. Like there's I've heard somebody explain that proximity sensor on a cell phone. It's like when you get so far away from that, you start to panic when you're away from your cell phone. It's the same way with the herd. And if you don't know, if you don't have places like this to go or people to fall back on to help you through it, it gets scary.
That's right. Exactly. I mean, that's what they want. I mean, your beliefs help you control your reality. So if you don't have an ability to manage your own beliefs, sort fact from fiction, all these things that we've been talking about, then you become very dependent on authorities. And this is what the cabal knows how to do with great skill. I mean, you take somebody who's dependent on what they hear from an authority like the mainstream media, and you put them in a position of authority where they have to now in a mall tell people to put their mask on a certain way. That person is going to feel so safe and secure in their house slave position, and they're never going to question it because they're in a position of authority. You know what I mean? So it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. The authority, the guys, wasn't there a study done that people tend to listen to a person wearing a white lab coat over somebody wearing like regular street clothes? Like it automatically makes you, it's like a program.
They'll say the exact same thing, some random person, but then exactly what you said, somebody with a white, not even like, hey, I'm a doctor and these are my credentials or whatever. It's like, they're literally just wearing what looks like, oh, they look like a doctor. And they say the exact word for word same thing. And people will believe that person. And the other person will just be like, oh, whatever,
Right. Yeah, Dr. Malone and Peter McCullough should have wore lab coats on their interviews.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the whole thing why you need a military veteran to tell you that a UFO sighting is credible over just a citizen or a civilian.
Or an experiencer that's actually had firsthand.
Right. Like, oh, he has badges on his uniform and he served in the army. He must be credible. He must, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. He's a perceived authority.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Like what's the limited hangout UFO panel that is it MUFON or CSETI?
There's a bunch of them, I think. Yeah.
Is it MUFON?
I mean, MUFON's basically limited.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. What about it?
Oh yeah, and then there's Tom DeLonge's.
Yeah.
Right. To the Stars Academy.
What do you guys follow any of the ufology news, or do you guys cover any of that stuff ever?
not as much in the last couple of years, just because, it started to get like, there was that golden age, with cosmic disclosure and everything, when it's like everyone seemed like they were coming together in this beautiful way. Mm-hmm. And then, it became very just inundated with like smears, attacks, division, essentially, and distraction, a lot of distraction, and a lot of like, traps, essentially, just like, all these Fed traps that keep happening in the internet and at events. Like what were those guys we were reporting on recently? Patriot Front folks. There seems to be a lot of that kind of stuff in the ufology community. So I love it all, and I still eat it up. But I feel like to get to the point where we are gonna start to hear about these things, we got to get through it's like putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. Right. We got to get through the lower level stuff and build through that, and then they can maybe possibly create a timeline where they can bring the stuff forward. And it's like, that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, it's interesting. I agree with you 100% actually. And I think that we're in a position now where we see both sides of all this stuff. We see the infighting, the division, the fake narratives, people being used, just all of the above, everything you just mentioned. And we find ourselves in the middle of it. And it allows us to use our platform as like a voice of reason now. And like, that's why we want to like cover like discernment and how to properly research and how to, question these people without just blindly believing them and all of the above. But the main reason I asked is because it's becoming a mainstream news topic now. It's being covered. Yeah. It's being covered in the media. On Tucker Carlson has a whole UFO hour or whatever, This stuff is becoming common talk now. And it's only a matter of time before a lot more people are covering it. And I know we're getting the whole, like, the truth wrapped in a lie thing with their narrative, but it is helping people who are totally asleep to it.
But it's helping. One of the biggest problems for so long is the laugh factor of UFOs in general, or ETs in general. It's like people, you try to, 30 years ago, you try to talk to people, not that, I was like 4 years old 30 years ago, but in general is what I'm trying to say. People, you try.
Aaron woke up red pilling people.
Yeah, it was you try to talk to people about this stuff, and hardly anyone would take you seriously, or they would laugh, or they think you're just a crazy person. Well, now you have the mainstream talking about the fact that UFOs are real. Like, we're observing these things, we're tracking these things, even if they're pushing the threat narrative, which they are, and they're trying to steer it as, oh, it's a threat, so we need more money so we can build all this, defense stuff. But what they're also doing and shooting themselves in the foot by doing that is admitting this is a very real thing that the governments are taking seriously, and your perceived authorities are taking seriously. So now people like us can actually talk to so many more people about UFOs and ETs and our own experiences, and they will actually listen, and they'll be like, oh, like, tell me more. They actually, will take it seriously and hopefully go on their own journey for truth and do their own research and be like, let me figure out what this is all about. I think there's something going on with this. Yeah. And people are more basically than ever before.
You guys are providing an essential service for sure, and in a community that desperately needs it.
Right. Yeah, it's really important.
Yeah.
I mean,
thank you.
I think there's so much benefit to be gained from considering these ideas, especially in ufology, because you're dealing with cosmic ideas. Like, what is your relationship to reality? What is your relationship to, other worlds, the creator? Like, all these different things that often get belittled in the modern age, especially in the materialistic world that they're trying to push us into. So it's really good to consider. However, they have also weaponized it in a lot of ways. Yep. And the reason why I say that, and this is part of the reason why, I made a personal decision, and Ryan, kind of synchronistically also made that decision, is I made the decision to stop covering so much of the ufology, because in my opinion, it was acting as a cul-de-sac before the gold mine, as Mark Passio likes to say. It's like, it's an awesome thing to study, but it can be so enrapturing that it can actually distract you from other things that might be more important. And
absolutely,
the way the system works, like, here's another little tidbit about psychology. They don't have to get you to totally believe in the narrative. All they have to get you to do is to struggle enough so that you spend most of your time doing other things than focusing on what would it take to defeat the cabal. And that means unity. It also destabilizes countries and nations in a longer term perspective, because, as strange as it sounds, if it wasn't for religions, we wouldn't have societies as we know it today. So if you can get a people to break down their connection to the fundamental place where they get their values and their ideals, then you're going to destabilize a society at a seriously deep level. And that will allow it to be able to be more controlled. So, it's all great things to consider. But at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, how much time and energy do you spend on it? And if it's everything you got and you're not necessarily making your life better or making alliances with other people so you can work together, then maybe you should just pull back a little bit and get a little bit more, your feet on the ground.
Yeah. Like and are you making it into another belief system? And that's what I see a lot in the UFO community, is that people form their own little belief system, or they have their leader that they follow, and everything they say is gospel and truth automatically. And the end of story. And then someone comes along saying something that goes against what they're saying, and then suddenly, or you have this person, their leader, attacking someone else or information.
That's the stuff.
And suddenly you have the mob of people that are following that person all attacking that person or that information. And it becomes this like war of different tribes. It's very tribalistic, and that's a huge trap. It's
like, how many of those people are bots, or like, glowing ones and fed boys and et cetera.
Exactly. And then everyone gets way off track and off focus, getting caught up in who's right and who's wrong. And
when both people
that's not what it's about. It's like, everyone needs to go on your own individual.
Well, the funny thing about it is you have two self-appointed leaders, let's just say it like that, and they're both they both have their narrative, and they're both pointing fingers at each other, and they're both saying, oh, there's going to be division, when they're the ones causing division. This person's compromised, whatever. But when you really step back and look at what each one of them are saying, it's so absolutely ridiculous out there to what the mass collective is actually ready to hear, that anybody in the street that heard either one of their stories is going to think it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, people don't believe in this stuff anyway. Like, what are you getting so worked up for?
That's a great point.
And we're not even to that point yet. Like, we're still trying to get people to believe that UFOs are real. Just chill out. And it doesn't matter. It's all, it's just, it turns into storytelling.
Put out their own information, let them say what they want to say, whether you agree with it or not, or you think someone's probably a deep state agent or compromised in some way.
The most useful life hack I've ever discovered was to have a for consideration pile and just mostly rely on that, and blind faith, just leave that to God.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Right.
Like, for example, I personally think Alex Jones is a controlled opposition.
Oh yeah.
But I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I like, a lot of the stuff he says is very true, and he puts out a lot of great information, and he's doing a lot of good he was a part of my initial awakening and helping me wake up to a lot of stuff. But I didn't make him into a cult leader or my, everything he says is gospel, and I'm only going to follow Alex Jones, which is what a lot of people unfortunately do. But if you can not do that, you can listen to anyone, and they could be a deep state agent, they could be a controlled opposition, or they could be compromised in some way. But if they're putting out a lot of info, or even the info that's not necessarily true, if it's at least info that is waking people up, if it's doing good in some way, then it's ultimately a good thing. And that's up to the people themselves.
And this goes back to Justin's viewpoint on everything as part of the spiritual journey, because even when you're following somebody who might be a disinfo agent or a shill or whatever, and then you realize that you've been duped, there's a major lesson in that for you. There's a major lesson in that. And it's super healing. I mean, it can eventually be healing, but it's going to lead to a lot of growth. And, unfortunately it sucks, but now you're not going to let that happen again. You're like, okay, here comes this new person with all this new great information. I'm not gonna get so emotionally attached this time. Hear what they have to say, and you can start having a more balanced approach on how you consume information. And like you said earlier, don't don't consume so much to where it just takes you off your path and you forget what you're even doing here, because it's all designed, or trigger events, there's narratives, they're designed to get you sucked in. Just like the 40-hour work week, that's designed to consume your mind. So you don't think about anything else but work and then a beer on the weekend,
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
It's the same
And
exact
all your energy.
Yeah, they're giving all your energy away. It's consuming you. And like, people want these external sources of information when they can just go inward, go on their own path, their own journey, and connect themselves and get everything they need to thrive.
And you have to people need to understand too, it's not about believing or disbelieving. And this goes back to what you were saying earlier, Justin. You don't believe or disbelieve anything outright that you hear. That's the wrong thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how credible or whatever you view the source or the person that's saying it, you don't know if something they say is true or not, because you're not them and you don't have the experiences that they have. You're just hearing it from them, and it could be true, or it might not be true, or it might be partially true.
Right.
But what you do is you put it on a shelf. You say, okay, this is what they're saying. This is this information. Great. And then you just do that with everything. And then over time, what happens is you form this kind of big picture. And when there's one greater body of truth, what happens is it will pop up over and over again through different sources and different people, and you'll start to see that. And then you can say, okay, this is most likely, and even then you don't know 100%, because
right.
I don't think you can ever 100%.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of indicators that tell you that this is a possibility, or even a probability.
Okay, this seems like the most probable. Yeah,
probably. Yeah, you nailed it.
Truth.
Yeah, that's the language you want to use. I mean, probability and possibility. Like, the bottom line is, we don't know if we're heads just swimming in jars right now. Like, how do we know? Like, how do you really know? And the bottom line is, you don't know. But that doesn't mean that there's no truth at all. That's what the postmodernists believe, that because we can't prove everything unequivocally, that itself is proof that there is no objective truth. And I would argue that's not true at all. But you got to get comfortable with possibilities. And when you do that, that's kind of an initiation. Like, let's face it, nobody likes to go from this really safe and secure, everything in my world has been proven because my parents told me when you're a kid world, to the adult world of, oh my God, like, I don't know if I can trust anything. So I have to get really good at managing possibility and probability. But man, when you do that, when you finally get that muscle working well, it's liberating. It really is. And you become your own expert in a lot of ways.
It's all in the game. It's all part of the journey to truth.
That's right. All right. That's a wrap, everybody.
Right. No, it's very true. It's very true. We talk about this a lot more and more lately. We come in, when we all got into this, when we were young, we were a little naive. It's exciting. There's all this stuff out there that we had just been blind to our entire lives. And it's easy to fall for stuff and to get baited into things when you just don't know any better. But that's all part of the journey. This is what disclosure looks like. This is what the awakening looks like. It's not going to be this picture perfect thing that we've all been imagined. It's a messy,
the government's going to come out and tell us the
floppy
truth.
Mess.
That's the full truth. And then we're done. Disclosure happens.
It was only that easy.
No. Exactly. So we're only that.
Because the problem is they probably don't even know.
No,
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
like, you understand how compartmentalized everything is. Like,
exactly.
The surface level government does not.
What's that, Ryan?
Does not know most of.
I have no doubt that there are special access programs and classified technology that would blow our minds. But how many times I've been like talked about things like it was like fact, and then later on I was like, well, wait a minute, maybe that's not true. Like, you have to go through that as part of it, and everyone has to go through that. Even these people who just like follow the science, like, they're going to get it in the worst way when they made their whole life based around this thing, and then it's just ripped from them. You know what I mean? Like, I feel bad for these folks. Like, they are victims. They're gonna have a dark night of the soul at some point here, hopefully. I mean,
Right. Well, the science is just another form of religion. We talked about that too. And it's just something that they're going to have to realize. You don't, it's just, I don't know. What's that meme I read? I quit. How did it go? I went to church for 30 years, only realized I was talking to myself, and it's true. Like, eventually you just realize, like, you have control of everything. and it doesn't matter what anyone else says.
Yeah, you have to get good with settling the information yourself. I mean, here's an interesting thing that I thought was really fascinating. I kind of thought about this a lot when I was shedding my atheism back in 2010. And I realized that, there's no way to prove unequivocally what something is. Like, you can't prove it 100%. You can prove it really well, but you can't prove it to 100%. So that means everybody's got this problem. We all are unified in one of the biggest problems across any place, any time, the entire universe, which is, how do we know what's true? And as soon as you realize that everybody else has a perspective on the truth, then you can combine those perspectives together to form a better picture of the truth, which means the search for truth is the ultimate unifier across every culture, every person, even species, everywhere in the galaxy, everywhere in the cosmos. That search for truth is the ultimate unifier. And when we stop bickering about what we think might be true or not, then we can actually come to the table at an even keel. And that's where the magic really happens, I think.
Right.
Beautiful. And the enemy of truth is not, it's not falsehood. It's thinking you already have the truth.
That's good.
So when you think you already have the truth or the ultimate truth, which is, religion has a lot of good to it, but this is one of the negative things, is it gives you this false view of thinking you already have the ultimate truth. And then do you search for further truth if you already think you have the ultimate?
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, I'm set, I'm good to go. And I'm just going to coast to now. And, when I die, and then you live for when you die, and that's when things are going to be amazing. And it also takes you out of the present here and now. And you think you have the ultimate truth. And that's basically what the mainstream media does too. It tells you what the truth is. And then you don't have to look you don't look any further because they already told me the truth.
Right.
So when you think you already have the truth is the enemy of the actual truth. Cause then you never go on that journey yourself.
That's
you
right.
never value that journey. You think that's, why would you go on a journey if you already have what the end goal of the journey is, or you think
right. Yeah, exactly. That's a great point. Why would I go on vacation when I could get online and do it virtually?
Why would I play the lottery if I'm already a billionaire?
Yeah.
I'm really poor. It's like,
right.
You could do a million analogies with that.
So what else? Norway lifts almost all COVID restrictions. Did you guys see that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We've been following it.
Too,
Denmark. What's the other one that we just reported on?
Well, they're talking about lifting some in like the Czech Republic, I think.
That's right,
and then I think even there was reports of Israel, but then I saw some conflicting reports, and it's just like, there's so many countries, it's hard to keep track of what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It seems like it's so coordinated. I'm not necessarily buying into the idea that it's all positive right now and like good intentioned, but there's certainly enough to be happy about that these restrictions are being ebbed. We shouldn't all just sit back and be like, oh, okay, freedom's here on the horizon. We just got to wait and everything's going to be. I think it's quite the opposite. The people that orchestrate these things, they are masters of encroachment. And so they push until people are finally like, I can't stand it anymore. And they back off a little bit, go back to where they were. They just back off a little bit. You think everything's might be okay. And then they keep pushing slowly again and again. That might be what we're seeing now.
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting, the stipulations, like Australia. I have a friend over there, and because their reason is because over 90% of the population is vaxxed, that's why they're lifting their restrictions. And like, you have the freedom to travel in and out of states, and you don't have to wear a mask anymore, blah, blah. But then they say that, but then all these individual businesses are still pushing this stuff. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
None of it makes sense.
Right. And if you get COVID over there, you get a 6-month vaccine exemption if you test positive, meaning you have all the freedoms of a vaccinated person for 6 months after you're tested positive, including travel.
This is in Australia?
In Australia, yeah.
No kidding. Wow.
I'm 100%. That's not like hearsay. I have a friend who's experiencing that right now, and to me, that's very interesting. It's like, where's the logic there? Like,
and the fact they come up with 6 months exactly, like What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's that coming from?
Yeah, 6
expiration
months sounds
date.
good. That works.
Yeah, 6 months. Yeah.
Honestly,
Too long.
it's like the milk expiration date on milk. Like on that day, it's over.
Yeah,
Like,
that is exactly.
Yeah, throw it out, get it
6
out.
months in one day. Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
How many people do that? How many people just throw out the milk like they don't drink it the day after?
Yeah, or vitamins.
Right, yeah, exactly. Or tea or things like this. Yeah.
Or pink Himalayan rock salt that says
Oh my god.
200 million years old. And
Oh my god, do they actually put expiration dates on that stuff? That'd be crazy.
that is. It's hilarious. One last thing I want to get into before we start wrapping this up is I want to get after we've been through all this over these years, I want to get your opinion on the Q operation and how valid you think that was, and if you still think that's in play right now, because I do think that we're seeing even today, like what you would call Q proofs, proving themselves over and over again. And there's a lot of people that are, there's a whole narrative now that the whole thing was a psyop. Maybe it was a psyop, but a benevolent psyop. What are your thoughts?
Do you want to take this? I gotta let my eyes out.
Yeah, sure. Well, I do think the Q operation was valid. I don't think it was what some people think it was. So, there's a lot of people who talk about, they know what Q was all about. They know that Q was supposed to be this, and because it wasn't that, then it's proof that it didn't happen. For example, you hear this a lot, especially from mainstream media people who are like, oh, well, Q was supposed to be about arresting Hillary and taking down the cabal and getting Donald Trump elected in 2020. And look, they didn't do that. Therefore, it's all bogus. But
that's
nobody.
Proof that it's bogus. No.
Yeah, exactly. But nobody really knows what the Q operation is about. We have suspicions, we have theories, but we don't know for sure. Maybe we'll never know for sure. But instead of trying to debate an abstraction and something we can't confirm, let's just talk about what has happened as a result of Q's contribution to our collective reality. And what it has definitely done is it's caused people to think and rally around the information that came around that in way more of a coherent fashion than ever happened before, I would argue. Millions of people had their eyes opened and started questioning their reality and thinking for themselves. And, the other thing that Q talks about is thinking for yourself, critical thinking, do your own research, all these things, working together with other people to create a kind of, think tank with respect to information. That idea was really popularized as a result of Q's efforts. So, on those points alone, we can say that Q is a success in the sense that it got a lot of people up off of their armchairs and working together with other people. And, one last point I'll mention on this is that I don't think the point of the Q operation was a mass arrest of cabal actors. I think the point of the Q operation was to get people awake, because the bottom line is, it doesn't matter where we look in history, the reason why tyranny wins is because the people fail to be stewards of the society in which they inhabit. And once we wake up, get off of our and start actually working to protect the world that we care about so much and that we live in, then we can have a freedom and an age of freedom that we can barely imagine, way more than even the founding fathers were able to affect. And they did a really good job. So yeah.
It had such a profound effect on the mass consciousness that the ripples are just like still going out. Like even if Q never comes back, so many people are activated, it seems like, in government. When you get like your Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world, James O'Keefe's, it's just like the everyday people like us and you guys, we're just doing it. We're doing it ourselves. And that's even better than having some like placating power replace the old power.
Exactly. Yeah. I never, I forget the operation, a Soviet operation that people were really saying that's what Q was really all about, especially at the end of during the inauguration last year. And we actually wrote an article about it, debunking the idea that it wasn't just a way to get people to reveal themselves as being dissidents. It's much more than that, because, basically it's just to steelman the argument. The argument was like, well, Q was just about creating a place, a honeypot for people who were dissidents. So dissidents meaning people who didn't buy into the mainstream narrative. People were actually questioning authority and these kind of things, to create a honeypot where they would expose themselves as being in support of Q. And now they can be marked as somebody that can get rounded up or shadow banned or whatnot and put in a position where they can't positively influence the world. But that stuff already existed anyway. That's what cell phones are all about. I mean, they've been recording our conversations.
They don't need
for
to do,
Yeah, exactly. So,
make any
you know, I don't buy into that idea. Does that mean that there aren't issues related to Q, that we don't have like a kind of Q cult or maybe even a Q religion where there's this infighting between sects and all that? Of course, that's going to happen anytime you create a situation like that. But I think the overall effect was pretty positive.
Yeah.
Right. I agree.
100% agree.
I agree. And I for first and foremost, I do think it was a valid military operation on some level. Yeah. And most of those drops were comms. I don't even think they were meant for the public on sometimes, you know.
So yeah, some of them. Yeah, totally.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was when you talk to people within military, they'll tell you these are comms. You know, I've heard that over and over.
They'll say like, yeah, this is exactly what it looks
like. Right. It's not, it wasn't always meant for us. So there was an operation going on. Did they have looking glass? Could they see into the future? I mean, it's in some scenarios, in some cases.
Sometimes it does seem like
it almost seems like that. I mean, there's a number of occasions where they basically predicted the future. Sometimes it was like scarily accurate. Maybe they were working with the Simpsons. I don't know.
But then there's the whole right. We know the deep state is public, so they're seeing the drops too. So I do think, and this is what Q even said, like disinformation is necessary. I think a part of it was also to put out some disinformation to throw off the cabal or to get them to expend their ammo, so to speak, at times. To kind of like force the cabal to make a move, thinking like, oh, the alliance is going to do this on this date, so we got to hurry up and do this. And you would see like that. You would see right after a Q drop, some big false flag would happen right after. And it's clearly like, okay, the cabal is reacting to the Q drops or what the alliance is putting out there.
Think about it like in the war strategy, like you don't know if we're confused, they're confused. And if you have to take every drop as real intel, it's not worth risking like, oh, it's just another fake drop, this isn't going to happen, because that one time they don't counter that is going to be when it bites them, you know. So if that actually was happening, that would make a lot of sense. You know, it probably was so frustrating because there's, you know, they wouldn't know if they're just being trolled or not, but you have to take it
every time they have to react.
Right.
They don't know if it's fake or
right. It's like a guy pops out with a water gun 9 times in a row. On the 10th time, it's a real gun. You have to be ready just in case, you know.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy. Exactly.
Right. 2 things about Q for me. I was trained in journalism, so when I saw the media, just like the way that they were handling it, and you know, just my casual observance of Q, I was like, well, okay, the journalistic thing would be to read every single drop. And when you do that, and none of the things that they're talking about in the media, like JFK rising from the grave and all this other stuff that is never really mentioned and is actually completely like shut down by Q, and that's not being mentioned, that was a red flag right there. Like, okay, they are expending so much time and energy attacking the movement that it's like there's no smoke without fire.
Yes, great point, actually. Yeah.
And they're still spending time doing that, making a mockery of it, making movies, the Reno 911 movie, that whatever the hell. I didn't even watch it.
Did you watch it?
No, I didn't watch it. But and then the Borat movie.
Oh, I didn't even know about that.
What's the Reno 911 hunt for the QAnon or what's
it? Really? I didn't even know about that.
Really? Okay.
Really?
Somebody's gonna have to. People in the chat are gonna be going crazy, but yeah, I haven't
late night talk shows making fun of it, and
right? Like why?
Bear and all these people.
Like why?
It's like why? Why is every single thing? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a really good point that you brought up, Ryan, because you know, if you look at the way the media handled it, and this goes to show you how dangerous Q is to the powers that be, and we can probably make a pretty good argument for that because they never actually talked about what Q said. You only heard the straw man argument, you know? So if Q really wasn't that big of a deal, if the information was all bogus, then what they would do is they would expose it by reading the posts and then explaining why that post is BS with evidence that made a clear-cut case, so that nobody could argue with anything to the contrary. Instead, you hear the total opposite. They almost never mention Q. I don't think to me, and I was following it for like 2 years, every post that came out, I was like, what are they saying about Q? I never saw any mainstream source quote Q ever. So
exactly, you know, just it's always like the crazy Q fanboy that maybe might not even be a real person. You know what I mean? And
what they attacked was the followers of Q, who might not even be followers. The followers. It's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
assassination.
Right.
Yeah, they want to talk about JFK rising from the grave or like, gobbling on children. But it's like what I got out of it when I read the 5,000 some posts was, this is the FISA court. It exists. This is how it works. This is how you get Freedom of Information Act laws, like things that are literally changing our world today.
Mhm.
And they don't talk about that. They talk
Right.
about,
What I got out of Q is that the Earth is not flat. There are space programs that exist outside the public eye, and UFOs are real.
yeah.
Amongst many other things.
So many things.
Right.
I mean, well, that's so cool about it, because if you know how to interpret this information properly, if you know how to think critically, then, as I like to say, disinformation can be key information to a well-trained mind. You can glean a lot just by how the media and politicians and the mainstreamers react to this kind of information. So,
right.
Exactly.
Man, well, this has been great. Thank you guys so much for coming on and having this chat with us. It's been a lot
Thanks
of
for
fun.
having us.
Yeah, really appreciate it. You guys are doing great work.
Yeah, you too, man. You too. You guys are doing better work, not better, but you guys do your work requires a lot more research. Going through those articles and presenting the news like that takes a lot of effort. So thank you for that.
You guys, we're doing it every day anyway. So
it's
like, might as well.
You guys should be the mainstream news. Like you guys are what mainstream news should be. Actual journalism.
Maybe one day.
Yeah, exactly.
One day.
I know you're watching Donald Trump, so just consider it.
Yeah, we are available. Get in touch with my agent.
Vigilant.
That's him, by the way.
Make it happen.
Good luck with the conference too.
Yeah, definitely.
Coming up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's something. It's very ambitious. After being a part of a few conferences, we realized, hey, we could probably do this on our own, and so we're doing it. We're just doing it.
We're
We're
podcast. We just jumped into it.
Right.
That's the way to do it, man.
Yeah,
exactly. Hopefully this will work.
No, it's already shaping up. It's already shaping up. Yeah. There's a lot of work, but just like the podcast, it seems to all be falling into place. And I feel like when that's like an indicator that you're doing something right without having to force it. So we're just, just following that, and we'll see where it takes us. And who knows what we'll be doing a year from now, but we're having a lot of fun with it. And
glad to be here fighting the battle and the war for the mind with you guys.
Yeah, okay. It is an information war. So.
Yeah. You guys want to, all the information will be in the links below, but just stillnessinthestorm.com, I guess, where they can find you guys. Anything.
Stillnessinthestorm.com, but he's got Underground Newswire.
Undergroundnewswire.news is my news site. And then we have the, if you're using Rumble, that's probably the best place to see all our stuff, because not everything can go on YouTube. So I would just look at the Stillness in the Storm Rumble for now. Eventually, maybe we'll centralize it in like a Vigilant news thing. It's still we're still in the beginning.
Yeah, we're still in the beginning. It's a time crunch. I mean, honestly, I wish I could like make a clone of myself to do more work, because there's just so much work that has to go into all this stuff. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, we've been doing it like once a day, and it's like a 4-hour thing.
Because you're still doing Stillness in the Storm with that.
Yeah, Stillness in the Storm. I still got Into the Storm on Rise that I'm still doing. We've got this other project we're working on. There's just it's when you start to do this kind of work and you really have a passion for it, then you're like, holy mackerel, I actually don't have as much time as I thought. So but it's an honor. I'm really happy to have this opportunity. It's an incredible time to be alive.
Yeah.
Boom. Absolutely. It is. It's scary, but we're living through history right now, and we're making history. So
exactly.
It's huge right now.
I can't wait to see once the chaos phase is over, the new earth, so to speak.
I think the real fireworks haven't even begun yet. Wait till
I think so too. I think you're right. I think this year is going to be pretty intense.
Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, there was literally a portal over my house last night. I mean, what is happening? I mean, and there's a lot of videos popping up of these similar things around the world that just doesn't get covered. You have to just stumble across it on the internet, but there's some weird things happening that are totally out of the norm that we're not used to seeing. And it's getting brushed under the rug, but it's important. This is big stuff. And I'm excited.
Already happening. Yeah.
Our friend Paul showed us a video. I don't know if this was a real thing or not, but it was like a blue beam projection of what looked like a planet or a moon hurtling towards the Earth, and it was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, coming at these people in the city. And I was like, what is that?
Yeah. Those are some of these videos you don't know, like, because there's like,
if they're fake or not.
Like I'm in film editing, and I know that you can do almost anything to make it look real. I could.
Well, that's the problem with real footage, is like people will just assume it's fake a lot of times.
Right. It's not even.
It must be CGI.
It's not going to be a video that's going to disclose anything anymore. It can't be. And even when people see something in reality, it might be a freaking hologram. Like you said,
right.
Like,
that's right. Exactly.
But we just have to, keep our head above water right now and figure out what's what, and just stay true to ourselves. And that's what we're doing. And thank you guys who are supporting us and helping us make it possible. We love you all. Thank you for the donations. Thank you for all the beautiful comments and all the above. Guys. Yeah, we look forward to seeing you guys at the conference. And thank you guys for joining us tonight. Thank you for what you do. Any last words before we wrap this up?
Stay vigilant, my friends. It's a crazy world out there.
Boom. Good night, guys. We will see you next time. Have a great evening.
Take care.
Take care.
He said, listen, give me 2 years. You'll never want to come back. You'll have the adventure of a lifetime, and nobody will know you're gone.
You get deployed at 17 and a half. And now I was deployed from the New York Athletic Club. And we got actually deployed right out of the locker room from, you get beamed up to the ship, and then the ship takes off and you're gone for 20 years.
It's a very hard pill to swallow, but that's exactly how I experienced it. I was taken at 10 years old. I was taken and I was worked through several black programs. I was privately owned in the beginning. I did six or 7 years on Earth.
That's when all the stuff for the programs began for me. Specifically, the tracking that they had been doing since I was a kid, it followed me all the way through the military. And at that point, when I got to Diego Garcia, that's where I was taken off planet.
Kind of like opened that floodgate for me. And then all of these recalls started coming in, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And the way I was describing it, she's like, I've never had this with a client, but you're describing a parallel life right now.
It's a combination of human and other species. I was able to remember the name on their uniform. It's USS Arcorp. That was putting me through some kind of recruitment tests from age 3 until 12. And 12 is when I was potentially, taken.
He said, with your scores, I guarantee you'll make commander and you'll make pilot. And I said, pilot of what? And he said, 4-kilometer-long Starship. He told me what was going to happen. He says, you volunteer for the program, we'll put you in, you'll do 20 years, we'll send you back in time 20 years, age regress you 20 years, wipe your memory, and you'll just wake up in bed like nothing happened.
It's almost beyond words. It's beyond comprehension of how this could happen. Whoever's masterminding this, the Air Force, working with extraterrestrials, working with a lot of pretty wild technology, which I'll also get into, it's really beyond fathomable. It's beyond fathomable.